Hey everyone, and welcome. We're always told to shoot for the moon. But what if there were two? Today, we are diving headfirst into a question that sounds like it's straight out of a kid's storybook, but trust me, it uncovers some pretty wild truths about our planet, and maybe even how we see reality itself.
So let's just jump right in. Picture this. You look up into the night sky, and there, right next to our moon, is a second one. I mean, what would actually happen? Would it just be a beautiful sight? Or would it be a total catastrophe? Or maybe a bit of both? This is more than just a fun little thought experiment. It really gets to the core of how our entire world is put together.
Okay, so the very first thing we'd notice, and I mean really notice, is what happens to our oceans. It's so dramatic that Earth's new anthem might as well be that old Blondie song, because the tide wouldn't just be high, it would be, well, on a whole other level.
Yeah, before we could even get used to the spectacular view, our planet would be thrown into just absolute chaos. The gravitational pull from a second moon, even if it was smaller than our current one, would kick off some serious geological mayhem.
The scale of this change is just staggering. Physicist Neil Comans actually ran the numbers, and depending on the new moon's size and where it's orbiting, our tides could swell up to be 8 times higher than they are today. Just try to imagine that for a second.
And that massive tide would just be the start of a devastating domino effect. We're not talking about the water just coming up a bit higher on the beach. We're talking about tides that could be a kilometer high in some places. That would trigger constant, massive tsunamis. All that new gravitational stress on the Earth's crust. It would wake up dormant volcanoes and set off way more powerful, way more frequent earthquakes. It would be a complete geological nightmare.
So here's the bottom line. Our entire world map would be redrawn by water. Life on the coast as we know it would be totally impossible. Forget it. Cities like New York, London, San Francisco, you name it. Any major city near the ocean would just be washed away. Humanity would have no choice but to move inland.
But okay, let's just imagine for a second that humanity somehow survives that initial violent shakeup. What would the new normal even look like? What would it feel like to live on a planet that's been forever changed by its two celestial sidekicks?
Well, for one thing, real darkness would be a thing of the past. Our nights would be constantly bathed in the light of two moons, which would totally mess with nocturnal animals, right? And those crazy, unpredictable tides, they'd make traveling across the ocean almost impossible. Continents would become isolated, and culturally, we'd come up with entirely new mythologies. We might see the two moons as divine lovers, or maybe as bitter enemies forever chasing each other across the heavens.
But this whole crazy thought experiment brings up a much deeper question. It kind of forces us to ask, how do we even understand the one moon we already have? And this is where things get really interesting, because it brings us to this classic conflict, the tale of the poet versus the physicist.
This whole tension was just perfectly captured by astronaut James Lovell. Here's a guy who orbited the moon. He saw it up close for what it was, a barren, colorless rock. And he was just genuinely baffled. He couldn't understand how centuries of poets and artists could look at this dead rock and see something romantic and alive. He saw a rock, they saw a friend.
And here's basically how it breaks down. For the physicist, the moon is an object. It's a mass you can recognize, a dead ball of stone and dust that's governed by the predictable laws of gravity, something to be measured. But for the poet, the moon is an experience. It's the master of our moods, a glowing form in the dark, a silent companion that tugs on our hearts, something to be felt.
The novel Homo Faber really gives us the perfect voice for this physicist point of view. The main character is an engineer, and he just resists any kind of emotional connection. To him, the moon is just what it is, a mass, following a path, explained by a formula, simple, objective, real.
But then you have the poet, Federico Garcia Lorca. He doesn't experience the moon as some separate object out in space, no. For him, it's deeply connected to the world and to himself. The moon rising doesn't just pull on the ocean, it pulls on his soul. This isn't about measurement at all, it's about meaning.
So, this leads us to the biggest question of all, the one James Lovell was basically asking from inside a spaceship. Which one of these two moons is the real one? Now, it's tempting to just say, well, obviously the physicist's moon is the only real one. But hold on. Think about what real even means. Can we ever really, truly know what something is in and of itself, completely separate from us humans experiencing it? I mean, can a person ever just switch off being a person to get some purely objective view? The very act of measuring is a human choice.
And thinking about it that way kind of reframes the whole debate. Science isn't some default truth. It's a specific and incredibly powerful lens that we choose to look through. When we decide to see the moon as a measurable object, we gain amazing power. We can calculate its orbit, we can travel there, we get it. But it is still a choice. It's a decision to see the world in one particular way.
And this brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? To that childlike sense of wonder. How should we teach our kids and, ourselves to see the world? Do we really have to pick a side between these two moons? Think about how our science textbooks talk. They call the sun and moon's journey across our sky the apparent movement. That one little word kind of suggests that what we see with our own eyes every day is somehow fake, an illusion that science has to correct. But is it? Is the feeling you get watching a moonrise any less real than the calculation of its orbital path?
And this gets to the real heart of it. A child who looks up and sees the moon as a friend of the clouds isn't living in some fantasy. They're actually experiencing what one philosopher called a fuller and less restricted reality. It's a reality that doesn't just include mass and gravity, but also includes wonder and connection and meaning. It's a reality where we're not just outside observers, but we're actually part of the whole thing.
So our crazy two-moon thought experiment leaves us with just our one familiar moon, but maybe with two new ways of seeing it. And the thing is, you don't have to choose one or the other. You can appreciate the physics and the poetry. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. The next time you look up at the night sky, which moon are you going to see? The ball of rock or the friend in the sky?